So I'm going to start with some introductions, just real briefly, and then we'll move into the heart of what we're doing. So my name's Stacy Rutland. I'm founder of Income Movement, and we are a national organization that specifically works in the grassroots and coalition building side of the movement towards basic income policy. So we're entering our we finished our third year, entering our fourth year of existence. And we do a pretty broad range of ways of supporting and growing grassroots, from the Basic Income March and Day, an annual day of action where folks from across the country come together and really do kind of community action to let people in their community know that there's an active, engaged group that are supporting and fighting for basic income in their communities, to the Basic Income Guarantee Conference that just happened. And we, of course, if you folks were able to be in the last convening in June for the Guaranteed Income Community of Practice, we've recently launched a community engagement program, which is what we're all here to dig into a little bit together. So, for us, the idea of building deep community coalitions in support of basic income is a really amazing opportunity that pilot organizations have in front of them. And so the work that we have done and will continue to do is really to be at service to organizations such as yours that want to engage in the work, and how we can support you to do that work strategically with intentionality, get you tools, resources, best practices to do that work. And even potentially partner together to do that work if that makes sense to you and your organization. So I would like to just, before we dig into the agenda and the goals, we have a little icebreaker, and we can just do this in the chat, but I'd love to know in just a few words or maybe a short sentence why you believe in direct cash. What has brought you to guaranteed income and direct cash work? And so as those start to kind of feed into the chat, I think a lot of what we're going to talk about today stems from philosophical ideas around kind of the work that we do. And so it's lovely to just have an opportunity to see where people are at with that. So feel free to drop that in, and love seeing reproductive justice on there and maternal rights. Okay, so for our agenda, so today we're going to, the title of this workshop is an introduction to community engagement work. And so what we're going to do together today is really in many ways like a high level overview of what does community engagement look like? What is it? How are we defining what that is? What are the goals of this work? And then what are the implications of those goals on the work that we do? So today is a 1-hour workshop. It's really going to be, in many ways, the defining of the who and the why of community engagement. We have a whole series in August of additional workshops. This is kind of the kicking off the first of several. The workshops in August will actually look in and get deeper into the what do you do for community engagement and how do we do it. And that will be much more like maybe a classic workshop where we'll dig into some of that work together, so that when you leave, you will have some things that you can potentially bring to your broader community, your organization, around work that you might want to do around community engagement. But today is really in many ways kind of that level set. And so we're going to do a little bit of an overview on what the program is that we've kind of designed and developed and why. We'll define what community groups we're talking about when we talk about community engagement, so that we can just have that level set. We'll talk more about the goals, as well as the frameworks for how we do the work. And then we'll actually look at the implications of the goals, do an example, and just start to like map out what it means to have a goal, what the frameworks are, and then what that actually means in practice, so we can get to the nuts and bolts of what we mean when we mean community engagement. And then we'll do some along the way, we'll have opportunities for Q&A. We'll do some polls to just get a sense of where you guys are at right now in different aspects of the topics that we're talking about. And then we'll do some wrap up. So, so that's kind of as a whole. I do also want to make sure that we talk about what the goals of today are. I've kind of started to outline that a little bit here as we're starting, but in our minds today is really about that level set, kind of the broad scope and goals of community engagement, so people get familiar and comfortable with them. We anticipate that some of you might actually leave this conversation and want to have a conversation with either your coalition of organizations and advisory boards that you work with, or your team, to just bring some of what you learned here to them and see what it means for you guys. So enough for you guys to be able to talk about what this is and what you might want to do as we go through workshops and other pieces. But we also, another goal of this is really to understand where you guys are at, so that when we do the next workshops in August, we're tailoring those to the community. So some of what we're going to be doing is really just trying to get an understanding of your own landscape, kind of what you're doing now, where you have the most anxiety, where you have the most need, so that when we dig into things together in the next phase, it's relevant to you all. So those are the two kind of broader things that we're hoping we'll all leave with, so that we can know that the next set of workshops will be useful and helpful and really kind of get you guys to the next stage that you're looking to get to. Any thoughts or questions around that before we actually dig into some things? Okay.
I have a question. So I'm Patanjali, and you might answer this. So if that's your answer, I'll talk about this later, then great. I think with the title of the workshop, I was a little like, we're a community-based organization, and starting our program rooted in community. So my impression, I wasn't sure if this workshop is this for folks doing economic equity work to learn how to do community-based work, or is there also a workshop, or will this be a workshop for community-based organizations to get into economic equity work?
So I would say it's by design currently, it's organizations that are doing economic equity work who maybe don't feel that they have either resourced on staff or the background and expertise to understand the kind of full range of what community engagement could look like. I do think that there are, so a lot of the folks that are here are potentially already leading a pilot in their community, or a direct cash program. So for those folks, what are the kind of the lenses by which you can look through and build a strategic plan around how to engage with your community, and in a real high level, but also very tactically. And so I could think at a high level, that's probably the framework that we've created these through, but I'd love to, as we go through, understand a little bit more around if we've come at the other side of it also, of like how to start to do the kind of economic justice work and add that into the community work that might already be happening.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah. But I think what you're bringing up is great. Like, how are we defining this? What is this? What is it that we're talking about? And so let's actually dig into that a little bit together. We're going to start to define community in a moment. And, income movement defines community very broadly. So we recognize that everybody here is already doing community engagement, whether you're doing it with intentionality and best strategy and practices in mind, or not. Every time you're having a point of contact, communicating with any of your stakeholders, any of your community members, you're engaging with them, and there's an opportunity there to kind of maximize that engagement and think about how you're doing that work and how it's leading you towards whatever the goals are for your organization or for your program. So we want to talk a little bit about the kind of scope of what we can help support you guys on. But I think it's also important to know that you guys have a lot of experience and a lot of work that you're already doing in this space. So as we move through this process, we definitely want to get feedback from you guys. If we're missing something that has been critical for your organization, let's definitely think about this as a dialogue. We also want to just put out there at the beginning that the work that we do is, and when we think about community engagement, it is deeply rooted in process. And so for us, process is really about quality, not necessarily quantity. So as we go through this process, how do we maximize the interactions you're having with your community already? And then thinking strategically, what are new opportunities you might want to integrate into the work that you're doing to help you achieve kind of more of your goals. This really isn't, we're hoping that this isn't about adding a lot to your plate, but actually just helping you feel more equipped to have deeper connections and partnerships, get better results all around, and then also how to make sure that you're ultimately, as you're instituting those processes, you can save a lot of time in the long run because you're kind of a well-oiled machine and you're doing that work effectively. Okay, so let me share my screen real quick. I'm going to try to, as much as possible, keep slides and things like that to a minimum because I think they're kind of antithetical. But sometimes when we're getting new information, it's helpful to just see it concretely on a slide to be able to absorb it. So I'm going to share my screen, but then also we'll just be going back and forth between shared screen and having all of our lovely faces together as we talk about things. Okay, so our community engagement program, Income Movement has been doing this work for a little over a year with different pilots in the broader guaranteed income and direct cash community. And as we've done that work, we've really come to think of the community that you guys are most likely interacting with on a regular basis, in some specific kind of groups. And we group mostly for us to be thinking about goals and tactics of how to actually engage with folks. There's a lot of overlap in these. So that we're not, there's going to be in a Venn diagram, there might be people who play multiple roles. But we think of community as, at the most basic level, your own pilot team, like who's actually helping do the logistics, everyday work of your program. Then as you broaden out, who are your partner organizations? This might be your advisory board. It might be folks who come in at different phases of your program. So they might help you with distribution. They might help you with when you're doing the application process. So people might draft in and out. It might grow over time. But anybody who's basically rolled up their sleeves and said, I'm ready to do some work with you and help you make this happen. And then we also think about the broader community and of course the pilot participants. And so once you actually launch, your pilot participants are obviously most definitely one of your community members. But we also have the broader community members as well. And so these can be everyday folks in your community, and the role that they play or the things that you invite them to participate in might be very different depending on where you are in your program of direct cash. This could be elected officials in your community. It could be other organizations, maybe who don't have the bandwidth or time to roll up their sleeves and actually help in the day-to-day implementation, but are doing economic justice, racial justice work in your community, so might have a kind of a stake in the ground. Or it might be organizations that you want to engage with that that you see opportunities that would be useful or helpful. And then of course you also have within your community thought leaders, whether it's directly around guaranteed income or racial justice or economic justice, housing, whatever your areas of focus might be. But there's no doubt that there's folks in your community that are doing that work and have been doing it for years. And then of course, people like artists, academics that are kind of helping guide the broader conversation around the work that you're doing. So all of these folks are folks that when we think about community engagement, ideally we would at least think about when we're building roadmaps, when we're building plans, strategic plans, and getting clear about how we want to engage with these folks, when are the most critical moments to be engaging with them, and then when we do that, how we do it in a way that is kind of centered and rooted in our mission, our values, kind of our ethics. So I want to pause here for a moment and just understand, are there other folks, groups of people that you guys are interacting with that you think of as community that would be important to add to this list? And we'll come back to this towards the end also. So as we go a little bit deeper, it might spur thoughts. But definitely just let us know in the chat. I don't have the chat up. I should probably have the chat up. Okay. So this is a little bit of the framework. This hopefully helps you guys see how broad your community engagement, the work that you do, could be. In that, when we think about the goals, which we'll get into in a minute, the goals, each of these community members are going to play a different role, and potentially have a different level of interaction with you around those goals. But it's important for us not to be too myopic in who we focus on, unless it makes a lot of sense, unless we've done the work and looked at and thought about, and then it's like, no, what we're going to really do is just hone in on these one or two groups, and we're doing that intentionally, and there very well can be reasons to do that, for sure. All right, so then let's talk about goals and the goals of community engagement. Oh, there's some suggestions in the chat. Awesome. And then I just hid the chat. It looks like Tracy and Jim. Tracy, do you want to go first and let us know? Come off mute for a sec. Who are your suggestions?
Yeah, I think Jim and I may have both had a similar suggestion. We've got specifically the pilot participants on the slide, but I'm also thinking of the folks, especially since our program is going to have to be fairly limited in number. There's going to be a lot of folks who may have been part of the program, but were not. And then I'll let Jim explain further if there's more there.
Yeah, I think those folks, and then anyone, maybe not potential participants, but people in the same communities as people receiving the cash, who may know about it. And so we'll be connected in that way.
People who have relationships, whether it's like family, neighbors, community members.
Yeah, just to add a quick thing, I bet there's a giant opportunity for stories from people who have interacted with people who are part of the participants, and sort of asking them what their preconceptions were, what happens when people get cash, and then what actually happened when their kid or their parent or their friend or whatever got cash.
Awesome. Okay, cool. This is great. And I think that, something that has definitely come up as more pilots are launching is, and this might be a little bit of what you're speaking to at the beginning, Tracy, or maybe not, but definitely folks who are who apply but don't become a recipient participant, like how how you manage those, like to keep those people feeling positive and feeling engaged and feeling like they're part of something, even though they're not receiving the money. Okay, well, I think this is a really good segue into the broad goals of community engagement. So let's dig a little bit into that, and then we can I can stop sharing slides for a few minutes so we can have a little bit of Q&A and this conversation. Okay, so in our minds, there's 4 primary goals. There's gonna be lots of sub goals from these, but as we've done the work with pilots, these tend to be what rises to the top around the things that they're thinking about with their community engagement. So on the left, numbers 1 and 2 are more broad. These might be considered kind of more soft or like goals related to values, whereas on the right, numbers 3 and 4 are really impact goals. They're that you can measure them. They're kind of clear. They're outcomes that we probably pretty consistently talked about as a community around things that we want to be thinking about in one capacity or another. So on the left, when Income Movement thinks about community engagement, and we think about, and the work that we've done, we've seen 2 really important pieces to how we do the work. One is having the goal of building deep trust, both with and between community members across a pilot region, can be really important. And the between community members is an important piece here. A lot of the pilots have a short lifespan, right? Anywhere from 3 to 5 or 6 years generally is the time frame for a lot of folks, whether the year or 6 to 12 months to get it going, designed, launching it, distribution for anywhere from 1 to 3 years, and then if they're doing data collection or whether it's narrative stories or hard data, the pulling together synthesis and reports, and then kind of socializing those. And in our minds, a big opportunity for pilots is to build trust actually between the folks that we bring together, so that when the pilot takes a step back, that organization or those folks, there's still kind of a thriving energy and support across the community. And so when we think about, I think a lot of us in this work, we know that that folks, general community members might have really negative experiences or impressions of their elected officials. You might host an event that has elected officials that support basic income and community members to come together and talk about the work. Giving space for them to start to build their relationships means that when the pilot is gone, there's still an opportunity there for community members to have a deeper trust with their elected officials. It might be that community organizations haven't had a chance to work together before, and your pilot is the first chance, kind of shared opportunity. And the more that they can work together and get to know each other, and you're building that into the work that you're doing, the more of an opportunity there is for them to do additional work together, whether it's at a very high level or even potentially getting deeper into programmatic work. So each of these is an opportunity for you as an organization to build trust with your community, but also thinking when you're doing that work, how do you give people an opportunity to also build trust with each other, can really just kind of broadly increase your impact, long-term impact in your community. And then the second piece, this is rooted in the idea of basic income, and we are a basic income organization. So a lot of what we think about is how do we get towards policy so everybody in a community who needs it receives this. And so for the work that we do, and I think naturally, and a lot of the organizations that we work with just automatically are doing this, but integrating the philosophical underpinnings of basic income into the design of engagement, whether it's events, activities, emails, whatever it might be, is really kind of walking the talk. How do you put into practice in every opportunity you have to connect with folks? How do you put into practice these ideas that you value, that humans have inherent value, not related to how productive they are in our society and how much they work. They have the right to freedom and autonomy. They have a right to have their basic needs met. And having this as one of the primary goals for us has been a really important opportunity when we're designing something like an event to give opportunities for us in the language that we use, the types of activities we do, that we are valuing the people that are there. We're giving them opportunities to have a voice. We're rooting our conversations in their realities of their abilities to or to not meet their basic needs. And that can really in many ways for us just be a checkpoint for us to be more impactful and ultimately model what we're talking about. And this can get at what I know a lot of pilots have talked about, that has been a root of their work, which is modeling a system and a program that is not patriarchal, is not punitive, right, and is humanistic in its approach, is just so critical. And so many people come to your guys's programs and pilots really being burned hard by a lot of the folks that they've interacted with. So being thoughtful about that, and you guys are just, it's just so inspiring every time we're working with a new organization. It's just like amazing how deep you guys are already doing this work, but formalizing it in the goals can be really critical, just to make sure when you're making a decision or informing the right decision that you want to make. And then we get to the impact, and this is some of what some of the folks have already started to bring up, number 4 in particular. Number 3, this idea of building long-term engaged coalitions of grassroots advocates to share in the goal of passing state and national policy. This again is when pilots go away, even if the organizations continue, being able to help people connect that pilot to the national movement towards policy and help people feel empowered to continue to participate in that work is a huge value and a huge kind of important role that pilot organizations can play. And then the 4th, that idea of elevating community voices to support narrative change, and narrative change, is a big topic across our community of how do we do this work? How do we bring together voices and understand which false narratives we want to address, what that change looks like. That's going to help broader society start to understand the value of direct cash, the value of basic income, and be more likely to help us get it passed. All right. I've been talking for a really long time. I'd love to open this up to Q&A. I'll leave this up on the screen for just a minute or two, because I know it's sometimes helpful to be able to look at them for a little bit and to help them sink in. But what kinds of questions does this bring up, or what things do we want to dig into a little bit deeper? Is there something missing? Does this make sense to you guys? Thumbs up. Thank you, Michael. Okay. So I want to just do a quick check, and I'm going to stop sharing for a sec so that we're all here together. So I'd love to see just real quickly with some emoticons, and there's now lots and lots of emoticons at your disposal. How are people feeling right now about where we're at, this idea of goals, the broadness of community engagement? Okay, cool. Kevin's doing it in real life. Awesome. Okay, cool. Well, then I want to do a quick poll, and this again is an opportunity for us to understand kind of where you guys are at. So I'm gonna launch the first of a couple of polls. So I've got it open right now. And if you're able to, it's okay if you're not able to take it because you're on your phone or, but this is to understand which goals align with stuff that's already on your roadmap or kind of list of goals for your organization. And you can choose as many as you like. They're starting to come in. Nice. Okay, awesome. Looks like nearly everyone has taken it. I'm gonna close it out and then let's look at the results real quick. All right, so can everybody see them up on your screen? Yeah, I'm looking to my team right now to give a thumbs up, but Jeff is doing it for me. Thank you. Okay. So it looks like building trust is consistently, which is great. I think that that's a good starting point for sure. And we're going to dig a little bit deeper into that one specifically. So, so that's great to know. That's already something that you guys have formally kind of integrated into what you're doing. And it looks like over half of you are integrating some of the ideas, some of those kind of initial immediate pieces of basic income around autonomy, trust, basic needs, human value into the work that you're doing. And it looks like a lot of you guys are doing grassroots work and narrative work, which is awesome. That's fantastic. So next, I want to just get a sense of any thoughts that you want to add into this to make sure we're understanding how to interpret this. We're going to take these and use them, like I said, for the next series of workshops as well, to just understand what we might focus on.
I selected other, and not to be like a broken record, but if there is capacity, I would love like a future workshop that's focused on community-based organizations and who are doing the work, but how they can integrate into the income movement. Because that's an area, like as a community-based org, like we kind of intuitively have connections to kind of do what you're outlining, but where I feel lost is in how to engage with the larger income community and that movement. So yeah, that's but maybe I'm biased or whatever as a community org, but I do think if the goal is for community engagement, like why not support community-based orgs who already have all these tools and help them and support them in building guaranteed income programs, you know?
I love it. Yeah, that's great. We'll definitely probably also just follow up with you because I think as you're speaking on, there's a lot of things that I think I'm sure for me and the team are thinking of ways that we could potentially support you and doing some of that, making.
Oh, I would love that. I would love that. Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. So now we have one more poll, and this is specifically to understand what goals seem that you have some kind of maybe anxiety or seem less relevant to you. So this question is, which below community goal feels least relevant, most overwhelming, or difficult for you right now? I know that least relevant and most overwhelming are two very different things. This is not necessarily designed for like survey methodology that's gonna, but what we're gonna do with this is the results of this are the same, which is what areas do you either don't think are important to your organization or that you need more support on. Both of those in our minds are opportunities to talk and dig a little deeper with folks around that. So It looks like we've got 9. And as you can see, you can only choose one, so it makes it harder for you. This is really understanding your priority of area that you would either like more support or need to understand more about to see if it's relevant. I get to watch the numbers tick and shift and change as these guys are. Okay, cool. I think we're one last moment. I'm going to close it up. All right, let's look at this together. Okay, so 7 of you, 40%. Let's dig into the building long-term engaged coalitions, grassroots advocates for basic income. So for those of you who chose this one, when you chose this, just maybe a show of hands or emoticons answered that question through specifically saying that it's like overwhelming or difficult for you to engage in right now. Not the least relevant, but the other part of that question. So if you chose building long-term, feeling a little overwhelmed, or Kia is raising her hand. Anybody else that answered that? Jessica, Han, okay. Okay. Great. And then the other one that had a few different folks is the integrating the philosophical underpinnings of basic income. So those 5 folks who chose that one, just out of curiosity, how many of you guys chose that because it feels overwhelming or difficult to do? Just a thumbs up or a hand or an emoticon of any kind. Kim, Kevin, okay. Okay, cool. Excellent. Well, this is super helpful for us to just understand a little bit more where you guys are at. I want to start to dig into what the implications of these goals are. You know, a lot of the time when we have goals and they feel a little bit nebulous, or even, you know, a lot, they feel interesting, but sometimes it's like, how do you actually do that work? What does that mean when you try to put it into practice? So we're going to look just specifically at the building trust one. This is one that you guys, a majority of you guys already have integrated into your into the work that you're doing with community, and so that's great. And so we're just going to take that and go a little bit deeper and understand, when you're building trust, what are the frameworks that get created around that in relation to how you do your community work, and then what are some examples of some actual nuts and bolts of what you would do as an organization to help meet that goal as you're doing your work. So let me share my screen so we can dig a little deeper into that. And definitely, as we're going through this, you know, let us know if you have questions, if we need to pause for a minute and go a little bit deeper. We're just kind of building a slide, so at the end we can hold it up for a little while also. All right, so we've got our goal: build deep trust, both with and between the community members across the pilot region. So let's dig into this a little bit. What are the frameworks that come out of this when we take this goal on, specifically through the lens of community engagement? So some of the things that we think about when we think about this goal that can help you, the frameworks that can help you achieve the goal: clear and transparent communication. This, what we, in the work that we've done with different pilots, we've heard over and over again, especially with key stakeholders, whether they're organizations that are part of a coalition or advisory board, or elected officials, folks that have some kind of official capacity or role. The ability to like really understand what's going on, what their role is, where in the process the pilot is at, and not overwhelming with information, but understanding what are the right pieces of information to be sharing at key times, has consistently just come up as one of the most important building blocks of trust. We found also that through the work with building coalitions and doing community work, that level setting expectations and then making sure you're meeting those expectations is a big part of what happens. And level set of expectations can happen during the planning and invitation process, and should, as well as when you're actually together in a room or in a meeting or whatever that point of contact is. A lot of the time people bring very different sets of expectations into an interaction, and unbeknownst to the person who's like kind of leading that interaction, you can fall really short, and through no fault of your own, except that you didn't communicate or give a space to like get a level set on expectations. And you know, we've found that that when this happens consistently, not only that people understand, like when we came into this conversation, you guys understood kind of, here's our goals for today, overview of what it is, and getting feedback from you for us to design the next stage of workshops. You guys know, as soon as we cover that, we're not getting deep into this. We're not digging into the work and doing breakout groups to like kind of build some things for ourselves. That'll be in the next set. It means that we're more likely to be able to meet everybody's expectations, and then and further build trust. Ultimately, the meeting them is pretty important. So like understanding, being realistic in your expectations or what you can accomplish together, and what that is going to look like is important, because you need to be able to meet them. Otherwise it's you know, it can hurt the relationship as well. Ensuring participant contributions have impact is another big and important piece. And this dovetails with the next one, value people's time and expertise. And we've seen this consistently in the broader work that we do, as well as the work with pilots. But really understanding what are the most important moments to bring people into a conversation, what you're hoping to accomplish together, and then why and how that's going to impact your broader roadmap, your goals, help further kind of punt the ball down the field a little bit further, is really, really important. You know, I think that there's often, with some pilots that we've worked with, they might have like a regular meeting with their coalition of partner organizations that's just set up on the calendar, and it happens, whatever it is, every 2 weeks, every month, every quarter. And if there's no reason to get together, if you're struggling in the week leading up, like okay, everybody's going to be together, what should we be doing? Then maybe you don't need to meet, and that is okay. Communicating that there's nothing necessarily on your plate, do other people have things that they want to make sure they're covering when they come together, and then actually choosing not to come together can be just as impactful to trust as coming together and being highly effective. And so I think those kinds of moments, when you're thinking, why are these people coming together right now, and how can they feel like the time that they're taking to be with us is important and impactful, is a really critical piece. And of course, when they then see that their contributions have an impact, they see the feedback that they gave. If you're inviting community members in the discovery phase or early design phase to come and talk about what their day-to-day experiences look like, or evaluate some of your early ideas of how you might do your program, to be able to make updates based on their contributions and share them with them and say, we got amazing feedback. Here's some of the things that we heard, and here's how it impacted. Here's the actual changes that we made based on it. Those are all ways that now people trust that when they give their time, it's for a good reason, it's of value, and that you're going to do something. You did it with intentionality, and it's going to kind of go to the next stage in a way that feels really impactful. The valuing of people's time, just one other piece, and I think this is something that has come up quite a bit in a lot of the community of practice convenings over the last several months. But if you're bringing especially individuals together to give feedback on things, this is community members, these are participants in the pilot themselves, recipients of the funds, paying them for their time, it can be really an important way to show that you value their expertise and their experiences and their time. So just how you show value can come in a lot of different forms, and sometimes paying people is actually a really important way of valuing their time, depending on who they are and what your capacity is to do that. We also recognize that a flat human value structure, like thinking of everybody as participants and important participants in the process, is whether they're an elected official or the partner of a recipient or whatever it is, they all have something to add and to give. And we generally think about folks who are participating in pilots as participants, not necessarily recipients. Recipients often has this idea of a passive and a one-way relationship, that they're just getting something, but they're actually giving a lot to participate. And we know that without those folks, we wouldn't be able to build best practices around what policy could look like. And so being thoughtful about that. I mean, you can use whatever terminology makes sense for your community, but it's just one example of this idea of even just down to the language that we use, recognizing like how everybody is participating together and is taking action together and having impact. All right. So these are just a lot of nice ideas, but what do these actually mean when you're going to do the work? And so the impact on processes, and I know I've said this a couple of times, process, how you actually do the work is just so critical. The difference between being highly effective and impactful in your community engagement and things falling short and just not, and kind of, landing with a thud, really is about how you do it, the specifics. So if we're taking this goal, build deep trust with your community, some things how that might actually manifest. Tracking communication and participation is really important. And if you're thinking about everybody as a participant, then you're tracking all the participants. So if you have a community event and 60 people come and arrive, knowing who those people were that were in the room, understanding how to communicate with them after the fact, and in 6 months, if you want to have another event, how do you engage them and know who those folks were, how they participated, is really important. And these can be really simple things like an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Doc, to like complex software tools, right? But that allows you to make sure that you're aware of where everybody's at and where your communication with them is at. And that builds the trust. That's that clear and transparent communication. It's all of those pieces. Having a consistent point of contact for specific groups or community members can be really important to building trust. Most folks think about individual relationships as opportunities to build trust. And so who are your consistent folks with each of the different groups that you're supporting and engaging with is important. And they can be different people on your team. That's totally fine. But making sure that those members of that team are communicating with each other also about what's happening, how communication is going out, can be really important. But having that, that person who's primarily building those relationships with that specific group and then tracking how that's happening in case they, get COVID and are down for a while or whatever it is that might happen, are just all ways to further that trust building. And of course, some of this is very logical, but things like using empathetic language, personable language, thinking about each point of contact as a continued conversation. What's the last time they interacted with you, and acknowledging that or bridging that into what it is that you're asking next. These seem like really small things, but they all signal that you're understanding who they are and what their participation has been. And it's like those subtle things that can really help build trust, and help people feel like they're in good hands of people who care, but are also like know how to manage things and do things well, which a lot of the time is just, even just that alone can be a huge opportunity to build trust, because sometimes people are engaging with organizations or people that are kind of chaotic and unreliable. And so like these very kind of straightforward processes can do a lot to create and maintain trust. And then, you know, the last two here, leading sessions and conversations with goals or intended outcomes. We've talked a little bit about this. And then most importantly, or significant to that, is following up any points of contact, sessions, events, workshops, meetings, with information on what got covered in case some people can't come, but also actually designating like, here's the progress that we made, here's the next steps, here's what you can do next if you would like to continue to do the work. And these can feel hard, you know, we're all pretty time strapped, but a lot of the time we notice that if we're building some of the feedback into the sessions themselves, or the events or emails or whatever it might be, to gather that information, so you're not just having to do it like all on your own. These polls, when we follow up, we'll follow up later today with you guys with an email that'll have links to the recording, so you can share it with your folks, links to this deck that we've gone through, as well as some high level notes and the poll results, and kind of how we're interpreting what everybody said was kind of important to them. That helps everybody understand what happened, why it happened, and how it's important to the next opportunities that we might have to come together. And then we already talked about this, but really making sure that you're meeting when there's a clear goal or value, and the paying people for their time. So I want to just pause here for a minute. We're coming up towards the end. This is our last piece to do together before we do a quick wrap up. But I'd love to understand, are there kind of questions or thoughts? This is an example of how we dig deeper into these goals and have them inform the work we might be doing. And when we work with this is work that pilot organizations can do on their own. It's work that we do in partnership with pilot organizations, getting deeper into their broader goals, the goals for community engagement, and like helping actually kind of think about how to do it. And we have lots of communication and tracking tools and, you know, and resources and all those kinds of things to share that are part of our toolkit. But love to hear what you all are thinking or questions you might have. Jim.
Stacey, really love all the stuff you have on there. Yeah, I feel like 100%. It's important to think about. The one thing I would also add is trying to gain an understanding of the barriers that people face, who are, I mean, particularly those who are your participants or potential participants. Because, and I think, I mean, it's already halfway there if you're providing compensation for folks, but if, for example, you are working with a group of mothers, then maybe childcare is going to be something that's a top priority. And so having that on site, or be able to cover the cost of that, when you schedule it, where you schedule it, make sure it's more accessible. Some folks are going to have technology barriers, and so whatever system you're using, track RSVPs may be an issue. And it's going to vary. So just having those conversations with folks to try to understand where they're coming from and making sure that structure has that in mind.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's great.
I wonder, how do you think about the time management aspect of all of this? The time that we spend working on the community is super important. Gotta make sure that they're, you know, taken care of in all these different ways. But how do we think about spending that time on that versus time on other things like raising funds
Yeah.
or working like directly with participants and working like in the program.
Yeah.
How do you think about that time management aspect?
Yeah, I mean, it's no small thing, right? Like, I suspect most of the teams that you work with are small. And so I think at the beginning of this conversation, when we, talked about that this isn't necessarily about quantity, like doing more, but the quality, like when you have the opportunities, when there's a natural way that you, or a point of contact that you are going to make, thinking about how you do that as effectively with as high impact and building trust, doing these things as possible so that you're feeling like you're achieving as much as you can in those specific spaces. But I also think that also once you start to get comfortable and clear around some of the processes to do it, and with your shareholder, like your kind of stakeholder, team of organizations that might be helping you kind of in an advisory capacity, or your participants and that are receiving the money, it might be an opportunity at a certain point to expand out. So you don't have to do all the things all the time, all at once. A lot of organizations that we work with, once launch happens, things kind of quiet down a little bit once that, like, all the kinks of the money going out. And then there's another 9 to 18, sometimes 24, 26 months left. And that might be the time when people actually pick up doing a little bit of work with some of the community groups that they haven't done any work with yet. And so I think it's recognizing capacity. It's also if there's ways for income movement or other organizations, like Patanjali was saying, like other organizations that do community engagement in your own communities that you could partner with to carry some of that load, so that you can still continue to do the things that are high priority, which is, getting the money in and getting the money out, right? I mean, ultimately, and doing it like as effectively as possible. We don't want to give short shrift to that because of these other pieces. But I think there are opportunities to maximize and then build. And that's what often kind of works best for folks. I know we've come to the top of the hour. I do want to just understand. I'm going to share one more poll really quick, and then we'll do an exit. But this is most important for our next step, which is which of these community members feel the most daunting to engage with of the kind of list that we had, so that we can understand where to focus. You might need to scroll because there's like 6 or 8 options in there, but this is going to help us understand where to focus.
Where's the button for rich potential donors?
That donors is not there, but you can say partner organizations because they are.
Yeah.
And we'll note that you're also talking about donors there. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to end the, one last one came in. Perfect. One last second. Okay. So I'll just share these real quick. It looks like partner organizations, everyday community members, and then electeds are kind of the 3, which is great. So what we're doing next for our next series of workshops, we're taking a week off. So next week we're not doing anything, but then the first couple of weeks of August, we're going to be focusing specifically on digging deeper into partner organization engagement and how to do some of that work, as well as everyday community members. So, and we can sneak some elected official stuff in there as well. But we're doing 2 different sets of workshops, one where we go deep into partner organizations and one where we're going to go deeper into the everyday community members. And so we'll follow up this with this session with an email with the links to those. We're dividing them with intentionality into 2 different sessions, going deep into partner organizations with folks who are pre-launch, who are kind of in that phase of design and discovery and getting ready to launch potentially. And then the folks who are post-launch, because the work might be very different depending, and we just want to make sure it's relevant. So, so this poll, I think the next sessions will be a great opportunity to dig in and do that work. I would just love to, as a last, and Erica's dropping in the dates and times, just so at a high level you have them, but the links will include in the email so that you can register for those if you would like to. The last thing I would just love to do really quickly, it'll take maybe 2 minutes, is to just go around the room, the virtual room that we're in, and just have everybody say one word that encapsulates how you're feeling. And there's a mad dash. People are like, I'm out of here. Okay, but we're gonna do it real quick. I'll just say your name and just a word of kind of how you're feeling after going through this process with us, so we can get a sense. And I'm just gonna go based on like who's on my screen in the order that's up here. So Jim, you're first.
Stress, but not because of this situation of the stuff going on.
Awesome. Annie?
Hopeful.
Erica?
Proud.
Angelita?
Full.
Michael?
Anticipation.
Chelsea?
Gratitude.
Kia?
Solidarity.
Jeff?
Better, feeling better.
Awesome. Kevin?
Connected.
Jordan?
Reflective.
Yvette?
Excited.
Natasha?
Ready.
And Jessica?
Aligned.
Woohoo! Yay, awesome. Well, thank you for sticking around for a couple of extra minutes. It's been lovely to spend a little time with you. Next session, we'll actually do a lot of work together. So hoping to see you in some of those, and have a wonderful rest of your day. We'll be in touch.
Before you all leave, I had one question. How do I get involved with the guaranteed income community of practice? Website. I want to do that.
Okay, let's follow up. Yeah, drop your email in the chat and we can connect you. Erica will connect you.
Yeah, I'll send you the form.
Thanks so much, you guys. Take care.